This thing, download that. Almost there. All right. That's updated too.
What's the point?
Your shit trying to get. You've done this before. You're suddenly opening something up, and then I want to kill all these other slides that should not be presented. You know, because you got work and you got some IETF. And the way through this crap is always a pain in the ass.
Yeah, screen sharing and the emails popping up, people are sending you.
Right. So I got to turn everything off.
It's very important to get the recruiters on the other end.
That.
I tried to kill my career 3 or 4 times by doing the send all of these. Yeah, I survived all of them. Two in between.
And then you sent me a PDF. Who sends me a PDF?
I sent it to you. You want PPT?
Well, no, I just got to close everything else that's,
Okay.
your third ones. I don't want to see that. Yeah. And then back to here. And boom. Only 2 minutes late. Let's see how this was. So people are still flowing in. We've got a pretty short agenda, but I did put something at the end for open discussion, which I think worked really well in Seoul last meeting and last year. So we've got some kind of turning points in the working group that we want to address. So it's a chance for open mic. But let's let it roll a little bit, a couple more minutes. You guys okay with that? Letting people come on in. Remember, leave your shoes at the door. Quick, shut the door before the AD shows up. They do shut the door.
Yeah, the most amazing thing about people when they tell them what they're supposed to do, they actually go and do it.
How strange is that?
Biggest secret I know is that people will oppose. People actually go and do precisely what they tell them. It's actually much then threat to my manager. If they start pushing on and like, now you tell me precisely what you want to say. And I'll be go and do precisely.
Boom. That sounded authoritative. It is now done. The door is closed. Release the hounds. There we go. We got a dot. Oh, they're still coming in. Hey, I know that girl up there. We tried to shut the door before you got here, but you're crafty. You knew like the whole UI of a handling.
You know Greg, the guy who makes friends easily, right?
The not beer sign on the door didn't do it for you, huh? Obscurity wasn't enough. It's going to just degrade into geek jokes. All right, looks like the doors are settling down. Welcome. We are at the Beer Working Group meeting, Chicago. If you don't mean to be in Chicago, I'm sorry, you took the wrong flight. If you don't mean to be in the Beer Working Group, you got the wrong door. Well, we're here. Well, let's start with some housekeeping stuff to begin with. We need someone to take minutes. We need a jabber scribe. This is the hardest thing to do for the chairs, to get someone to say yes. But doing it's not that tough. And I found, especially if you're fairly new to the IETF, it's a great way to keep you engaged in the process. You start learning names, you start learning the dialogue, and then there's an exchange that takes place afterwards with the chairs on, affirming what the actual events were. So I encourage people who haven't done it before, please step up and consider. If not, we assign you, and then you get none of the love that we spoke of. Minutes. Trouble is, I look up and I've already forced it on all the people that I know up front, and I won't do that to you twice. I see up here. I've done it to you before. I won't do it to you again. So I'd like to see someone new jump in if possible. I think that older gentleman with the white beard here is fairly new to the IETF. I haven't seen him in years. Oh, look at that. We have a jabber volunteer. Yeah. With that, you win a major award. Minutes. Seconds. Hours. Hey, you win. You got the minutes. We said the next guy through the door gets minutes. He's ignoring you. We need a volunteer to take minutes. Before we go forward, we will lock the doors. I thought everyone goes down. Their faces immediately hit the keyboard. I'm too busy doing email to listen to this. You, sir, walking there in the back, trying to sit down with a backpack. I saw you just volunteered for minutes for being the last guy in the room. I don't see it like a shaking head of a no. He's kind of, can you take minutes for us today? You'd be a big help to the group. Look at that. We got a volunteer? Yeah, we'll call that volunteering. Fantastic. Blue sheet's going around. Excellent. No, when new people come in, you can't punt. You've already been assigned. Okay, note well. All here have read the note well and have noted well. Nods, rooms. I'm not asking for any more volunteers now, so you can bring your eyes back up to the front of the room. We're okay? Excellent. All right. This is what we currently have for agenda. It's pretty darn light. In fact, I think some of this should go fairly quick. There may be one point of discussion that could be interesting. I was expecting a bit more because we had some stuff that came out of the interim group and some development took place in Seoul, but that's all right. I think we're going to push our discussion to the end, which is some interesting points to move our work forward. All right, anything to bash on this? Anything I'm missing? Anything that should not be on the agenda? Oh, I know that guy. You got so lucky. We were assigning minutes to the next guy in the room. Yeah, you were waiting, exactly. Well done. All right. With all those cheers of affirmation, I assume you think this agenda is fine and we'll move on. Excellent. Okay, first up then is Pierre. That's you over there. But you're presenting. Next up is Stig. I just saw Pfister on the draft name, sorry.
All right, so I was presenting this the last time as well. Since then, we've merged with this other draft that also talked about beer and MLD. So that's why there's a few extra authors here now. Next slide, please. So I don't really want to spend much time on this since this has been presented both by me and Pierre before. But basically, we're using MLD or also IGMP as an overlay for beer signaling. So basically, with the beer, you want to signal from the, say, beer routers over here by the receivers, the beer routers, like the ingress routers by the source.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike,
Yeah, Mike and the big box.
Okay, so basically, you want to have the egress routers by the receivers signal to the ingress routers by the source over there that they are interested in receiving. So what we're doing is we're sending MLD or IGMP packets with beer encap to, it can be a subset or like all the beer routers. And on the ingress side, you are doing explicit tracking, so you know exactly which routers are interested, so you can do the beer encap for the appropriate bit sets. Next slide. So we added, so we took the draft we presented last time and we added an appendix, which is a use case that comes from this other draft that basically talks about beer in the data center, including the VXLAN encap. The document, yeah, apart from that appendix, the document hasn't changed. So it's been in the same stable form for a long time, except for that appendix. The draft emerged where they proposed some changes to the MLD message format. We have taken that out. We don't want to make any changes to MLD itself. We just want to use MLD as for signaling. And we actually have implemented this, and it's been tested by a few different companies or organizations, whatever. So for the data center and that appendix, we might want to think a little bit more about, is there something we can do differently or better? But the main part of the document, as I said, is stable. So next slide. No, that's the last one. That's it. So yeah, so basically, I want to maybe ask if this can be adopted by the group.
Can we address first the history just a little bit, just kind of refresh? Because you said this added the appendix from the previous draft. I think the idea from the working group was to roll that work in and abandon that draft. Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we consolidated, remember in Seoul, we actually talked about this consolidated encapsulation. We had a various encapsulation drafts that were kind of stacking up, and we focused all that with a unified solution. But there were some ideas in that particular encap draft that were overlapping with MLD, so we got those people together. That's why the author list is a bit large, but it was inclusive in bringing thoughts together. And so this is the direction that we chose to go forward from, initially from the interim meeting and then agreed upon at Seoul. So what you're asking is this something for adoption? Give you some history. Let's see, feel for the room. With a raise of hands, who thinks this is working group adopted worthy? Okay. Who is against adopting this in the working group? All right, good. So I would take it. Hey, wait a minute. Your name's not. All right. Let's have more work. All right, that makes sense. So I think after early next week, we'll take this to the list for requests for adoption with the typical heartbeat and see more work be adopted. Thank you, Stig.
All right, thanks.
Actually, any other questions? Mike's questions? Concerns? Points of stress? No, we don't ask for desires, ever. Next is Fang Hui, and I think I have your latest draft here, our latest slide deck. And that is, yes, please. I'll keep pushing one till it hurts.
Hello, everyone. Here comes the young data model for beer OEM. I'm not Fang Weihu. I'm Gurong. Because the author Fang Weihu hasn't been here for some personal affairs, so I present it on behalf of him. and also on behalf of myself. The motivation and background of this draft. This is the new draft. This document defines the young data model for beer OEM. That's what it does. And as we know, there is a basic young data model in the Lime work group, layer independent OEM management. This draft is the extension of that draft with some beer specifics. Here we reuse the various components defined in the beer technology specific young data model as we can refer to the work group draft beer young. First, let's have a quick look at about the architecture of OEM young model and its relationship with the beer OEM. In the top, it's the generic OEM young, and which is the basic for all the connectionless OEM young model, which we can find it in a Lime work group. And it under that, it divides into several technology-specific young OEM, such as the SFC service function chain OEM young and the beer OEM young. That's what we are talking about. And all of these OEM young related with the specific technology, they share the uniform API, which can be easy to configure.
So can I just ask a question, as admittedly Yang ignorant, because I know there are doctors out there and I trust that they're going to move us forward. Are you working with a Yang doctor right now to ensure this fits the overall architecture?
I talked to the authors.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I talked to these authors and
Okay.
share this idea with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And the feedback?
Feedback, they may support this, but they may support this and they say that we should add some beer specific technology here.
Okay. Okay. So what you have here is a separate draft. Is this work supposed to stand as a separate draft from their perspective, or does it get rolled into the overall architecture?
Maybe it's a separate draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the references to the architecture draft that then
Yeah, we
points
have
to this.
reference to that draft.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
And
The
we
next.
got a gentleman at the mic.
Oh.
Actually, he is famous in Korea. He's got a stage show where he sings and dances. It's amazing.
Okay.
Stigmanas. Just want to say we have like a multicast young design team in the PIM working group. Been working on IGMP, PIM, and MSDP and so on models. So since they kind of know multicast and Yang, it might be good to ask them if they can have a look at this draft too.
Could you get the author in touch
Sure.
with this working group?
Sure.
Okay. Did you hear what he's?
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent.
Oh,
So I mean, those of us in the room have stepped in multicast either recently or decades ago. We've been tracking it around our careers, right? You can't get rid of it. But the reality is a lot of people who don't spend time in multicast often dismiss it and think it's something they can do later. And bolting it on after the fact is non-trivial. So it's great that we have multicast experts working on Yang requirements. And so we need to roll the beer folks into that work.
Okay. Thank you. We'll connect later. And the next, it doesn't work.
No, I got it.
In the next slide, we describe several paths in which we should include it in this beer-specific young OEM young data model. The first is the test point locator. Here in the test point locator, we list 3 parameters. The first one is bit stream length. The second one is subdomain ID. And the last one is BFR, bit forwarding router ID. We think all these 3 can form the test point locator. Next slide, please. About the tools, as there is a work group draft about the beer pin, and in which it describes the pin SMP tools as the beer OEM. So we list the tools of beer SMP here. And the next, I'm sorry, this is the next slide. Maybe we'll make some mistakes about this OEM layer we discussed with the young. We discussed with the OEM young model. The authors, they said that it shouldn't be used here, so we should omit this slide. I don't know whether I make it clear. This is the mistake we make.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, after we discussed with
So is this the wrong deck? Is this the wrong slide deck?
this is the previous slide.
Okay. You want me to, I can
We
swap.
just should have got this slide.
Okay, why don't you bear with me? We got time.
Yeah.
All right. I will, oh yeah.
Because in the morning we have some discussions with the authors from the Young OEM Young. So they told us that the OEM layer shouldn't be used here. The next slide. Sure, and the next slide. Yeah, next step. As this is a newly idea, we come up with the beer OEM work. So we want to ask about whether it is ready to start up this work, because now we can see there are many related work group drafts, such as the Lime Young connectionless OEM, the Beer Young, the work group draft, and some many others overlay OEM related drafts. Yep,
Yes.
Greg.
Hi, Greg ZT. I agree that it's important to do the correlation with the work in the line working group. I'm not convinced that connectionless model is really applicable to beer domain. Actually, I would probably think that connection-oriented would be more for the beer, because in a beer, misconnection it would be quite more critical, and that's I think that we should look at which one is really, so which of the models is more applicable and suitable for the beer OEM.
Thank you. I got the point. And we have a discussion about the connectionless and the oriented the state. And now we think that the beer may be much more related with the connectionless. And if Greg has another idea about the oriented with maybe some states, we can discuss about the details. And the last one, the least but not the last one is we welcome you to fulfill this work together if you are interested in that. Okay, next slide. Maybe that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any questions? Yep.
So just from my side, so that's for you, for Greg. So those are basically just attachment point, and the OEM model is generalized. I all understand it correctly, looking at the draft, correct? Because the model is being imported, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile the fact that we have all these specialized bits on the encapsulation and other technologies may not have it? You think that you can, that's also more like for Greg, you think that you can unify the models across, the traditional multicast and beer and all the other stuff?
Yeah, I think we can use the generic Young model while adding some some technology specific, some features in the generic Young model. Then we can form a technology specific Young OEM.
Okay.
That's what we aim to do that.
Okay. So if you import a generic model which has like beer specific stuff that other technologies do not support, how do you switch that on and off?
What does switch mean?
That, I'm sorry. Okay, Greg Mirsky. So yes, there are several ways to do technology specifics. So it could be as augmenting beer specifics to Lime model. That's one because basically what at least for it's hard to say, to speak over. So they use their test point location and characterization. So if we define test point in a beer sense, then it should be.
Okay.
But again, it might be one of the first exercises of applying this abstract model to the specific technology. So we might learn some lesson.
So who is the most important technology now for the beer OEM to synchronize with? The traditional multicast OEM going on?
Yes, actually, I think that we should look at what we call multicast because, for example, BFD, point to multi-point, would be applicable, in my view, to the multicast OEM. We do have BFD Young model, and we need to look at how BFD as a mechanism is applicable to beer.
Okay. What about the traditional multicast? The gentleman with the beard?
IP multicast?
Yeah.
But again, I don't know much of specific OEM, which is a multicast specific.
Okay, I go and poke behind the scenes. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, as discussed before, this is the initial draft, and maybe we should look into some details about that. Yeah. Thank you.
So is the intent to seek working group adoption of this?
Maybe next time?
Okay, fair enough. We'll flesh it out a bit more and then we'll take it from there?
Yeah.
Good. No need to
Thank
rush.
you. Thank you very
Good.
much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. And next up. Stop it. Is Greg. Combined.
Yes.
Boom. Okay.
Okay, just want to present you an update of work that we are now planning to continue at NVO3 group. It started as a design team under RTGVG, and so let's go to this next slide. So what was the objective? Their effort was to have some common OEM mechanisms and structures, formats that can be reused by various overlay networks, BIER being one of them. Let's go next. One of them was that to create an object of associated channel. So associated channel as a paradigm well known and been used, for example, since pseudowire. Then generalized associated channel was supported for MPLS LSPs. It allows to do the multiplexing of OEM packets, at the same time ensuring that these packets would be in band with the data packets if encapsulation of the upper layers is properly constructed. Let's go next. Thank you. Okay, currently what we overlay header have is it reflects the version number, message type, length of OEM message, has some flags, reserved field, and next protocol. Next protocol might be helpful for overlay networks. If you can go in the next slide. For different scenarios. Oh, yeah, and we have proposed optional timestamp block that one of the flags indicates presence of the timestamp block, which follows immediately overlay OEM header. As we found, it's some applications might use it for one-way round-trip measurements. And it supports use of different timestamp formats, whether it's NTP or PTP version 2, truncated. So in discussing their OEM, we formulated some requirements that go to the overlay encapsulation so that active OEM can really comply with the requirements of what it needs to do. And one of the requirements is that for active OEM to be in band with the data traffic. But without support from encapsulation layer, that really cannot be fulfilled, it cannot be guaranteed. And we have a lot of examples to that in some networks that have been developed earlier, and we had to work on compensating that with example in MPLS with introduction of GAL label and the rule that, for example, special purpose labels not to be used for hashing in the skip. So what we point to the designers of encapsulations that even though there is a practice of using the payload to control and use equal cost multipath environment, it's beneficial to have generate entropy level based on certain rules at the edge, and then in the domain, overlay domain, to use entropy label value for ECMP. That will allow use the same value for active OEM packets to ensure that they traverse the same path of their entropy as data packets. Okay, so next. So now this is an example of how we propose to use next protocol field in OEM header. So if we have a pure active OEM case, then the next protocol will be, let's say, 0, or actually their context is none. So pointing that we have only OEM message in the packet. And that's will be case of active OEM. Next slide, please. But we have a lot of discussion of interest adding some OEM or signaling statistic telemetry information to the live packet. That can be achieved with the overlay OEM header as well. So it's just uses their next protocol payload to indicate the payload type of their data packet. So we agreed to characterize this method as based on RFC 7799 as a hybrid type 1. So we still carry data payload, but at the same time we insert some packet. There is already example of this method being used for residence time measurement to support transparent clock in 1588 protocol.
Question, how do you deal with MTU problems?
That's a very good question. That's why proactive MTU discovery is important. So, for example, in a scenario of residence time measurement, we only use 64-bit scratch pad, so it's a fixed size, and that basically can be accounted, so it's much more easier. But yes, you're right, there are some scenarios that are being discussed which limit of MTU and non-support of fragmentation is an obstacle. Okay, next. So we have, second is about echo request reply. We can skip this, go to next. So the second proposal that we're working on is well-known good old echo request reply. The format is very much resembles LSP ping. It's just a little bit dense, but has all the functionality. And our goal is to get as much as possible common functionality reflected in this document, and then all the special cases that might be interested for different overlay networks being done in respective working groups. And that's one of the goals of this presentation, to bring it to your attention and raise some interest for the discussion of the common solution. At the same time, get seating for how to use this in beer-specific scenarios. Next slide. And so, yes, this work already has somewhat extensive security consideration, and how that can be addressed if we introduce this echo request reply in the network. Okay, so the next. There is a work solution being proposed in NVO3 for their trace route and transcending trace route. There are some different scenarios that are being considered, because we have overlay and we have underlay. Transcending trace route addresses the tracing of underlay network, but there are scenarios, I believe, in beer where tracing overlay is as important, because you have ingress router, you have transit BFRs, and then you have egress routers. And they might have ECMP in overlay as well. So that's something I think that will be specific to beer. So next steps, we'll continue work in NVO3, and we invite your reviews and comments, suggestions to that group. But at the same time, please consider this as a framework that we'll appreciate if you can use it for your specific OEM.
Any questions from the room? Right. Gentleman on the left has a question. Let me just address it a little bit. There was a thread going on about this particular work and how it actually is not taking place in this group, but he has a responsibility to notify all the groups that it could affect. And the issue is, you put up a 15-minute presentation in 15 different working groups, right? Or some way to consolidate. The problem is there's nothing structured in the IETF to let that happen, right? I mean, you guys need to know about it. We send it to lists and may not get response. Well, you've been notified. This work's taking place. We need input from the beer group. If you take a particular excitement in helping the OEM move forward, please engage with Craig here, and we can get solid representation from the beer group towards the OEM.
So my question is more specific. You have here on the slide that you ask for adoption. Are you specifying us?
No.
Let's
yes,
find the minutes.
it's just, yeah,
for adoption this work.
No, right. We will ask for adoption in NVO3 group.
NVO3. Right. So if you want to actually duke it out, go to the NVO3 group. When is that? Okay, but it wasn't.
No,
it wasn't this morning.
No, not this morning. No,
gotcha. So we still have time this
later.
week.
It's later this week. Actually, NVO3 will have 2 sessions, and early in the first session there will be a short presentation, and then we continue to work in the round table manner with the second session to share our discussions.
Excellent. All right. Good process info. Appreciate that. Any other questions, comments? All right, next.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, how do I print this guy? Who is this guy? Tony what? No title. Oh, you do have a title slide. All right, take it all back.
Okay, so that's just an update that the code points have been called now. So Jeffrey shot the stuff off that will be going basically to IENA. OSPF is under 7120. So that's like the IENA early allocation thingy. And we need 3 values. We need the beer sub-TLV, MPLS encapsulation sub-TLV, which is really a sub-TLV, and the tree type sub-TLV. Next one. And ISIS is actually under expert review. Les left the room, right? Elvis not in the building. So, so I'll be poking the chairs there. I think they have 3 experts, and then probably we advise IENA as well. Technically, we also need 3 points for the MPLS and caps. We need 4: the beer info, and the sub-TLVs, which is the MPLS and cap subdomain tree type, and we have the BSL conversion, which is optional right now on ISIS, which is missing no SPF. Maybe we introduce that. So that's kind of getting officially get an early allocation. So people can actually now start interrupt the stuff with official, early allocated numbers. That's it. Questions? No? Okay, short and sweet. Who are you?
Request I made.
Name?
Eric Rose and Juniper. There's also a need for code points for PIMG tunnel types. Via tunnel.
So that's the overlay drafts, right? I'm lost. We're talking overlay drafts as well? That we need code points there?
I don't understand your question. I sent a note to the worker group today. I was asking for early allocation of code points. I think it was the PIMG tunnel type tunnel for via.
Okay, so I didn't see that.
It's not on your list, right? So
okay, so we have more asking for early points. Cool. Okay.
So should I introduce you two so you can work together on that?
Yeah, like. And who are you?
Anonymous AG. Sorry, Alice. How solid are the IENA sections in the documents? And that's really the main question.
In which sense? What is requested from IENA? Both documents have IENA sections. But what will be requested here? Or what's your question?
Said, how solid are the IENA request sections in the various drafts?
Yes.
What does solid mean? They're not squishy. They're fairly solid.
I can take a look at them if the working group's happy. We're happy. The main issue with early allocation is it's about a year, and then you can do a second request, but it starts a deadline for when the allocations expire.
Yeah.
This particular set of code points, I think they do meet the requirements of RC 7120 in that as part of the spec is stable. You really need these code points to do a prototype, and I wouldn't worry so much myself about the deadline because I had never across the code point.
No, but since I get to do process, then I get to, the first one is fine, and then the second one is go and explain to the ASG why we need to extend it an additional time. Point.
Is that someone else's problem? Is that what you're saying?
Right. And you don't expect me to comment what I think about this 1 year anyway, right? So.
All right, any more comments on that? This is more of a status update than a request to the room, but it is an ask from the working group as a whole.
One kind of silly comment, right? We didn't, when we made these requests for these code points, we followed the proper process and didn't ask for any suggested values. However, if there just happens to be anybody who's actually fielded a prototype and actually uses values that don't come from the experimental space, this might be a good time for them to speak up and the hope that IENA will allocate different values, or maybe the same values.
Yes, I also have.
Right. So yeah, I don't think.
Also have a discussion behind the scene that some of the SR code points are being squatted on, and we may collide, right? So that's all going behind the scene, and I think all the stuff will be put forward. by the people you know who you are.
Next slide. That's your last slide. This is when the hook comes out. All right, I don't think we could overstate that enough. Please work with Eric, reach out to him if you've got any implementation you're working with now to ensure that we stay consistent in the development work on any code points you're currently using and address that going forward with the IN request through Eric. Yes, you, sir.
Hi, Cisco. Thanks for raising those early allocation points, actually. So it's about time, actually, to go ahead and do that so we can do maybe some interoperability testing, when the time's there. Yeah, thanks.
Did you say interop testing?
Interrupt testing, yeah.
Good. That's a segue to the next piece here. Thank you. That was your cue. All right.
All right, good. We're done?
Yeah, you're
No
done.
further comments? Good.
And this is me. All right, back to this. All right. Now, open discussion section. You guys are fully aware that we have a charter. It's a working group. In our charter, we're told that this work is experimental. That experimental status is actually dependent upon our ability to prove that this is something that the community needs as a whole. It's a shift in addition to the internet architecture. So I posted this, just the text right from the charter. You guys can pull the stuff up. I don't know if I can read it to you or you can read it yourself, but I want to highlight some key points in this that are part of our decisions in moving this stuff forward. So particular sensitivity of adding new significant functionalities are the points brought up to the data plane. And that's really what's unique about what we're doing here. If you look at the current internet architecture, we've got IPv4, IPv6, MPLS, and now we've got BIER. So it's at that point in the hourglass that we're asking to not change something, but add something new. And so I can seed your thoughts, but I'd rather get thoughts from the room first and have a really open discussion about this stuff. In the charter, it says, look at item 9 below. So 9 brought in here. Deployment evaluation seems to be the key to seeing. So we can look at this and say, this makes a lot of sense. What does it really happen on the wire? What does it happen in hardware? What's the impact of the architecture of the boxes as well as the internet at large? So in this, it talks about deployment experience without defining what deployment experience is. And I've had some discussions with folks along the way, and I think it's a fair assessment. Well, I take it back. Yeah, I'll put it out there. I think it's a fair assessment to say that before anyone actually puts it in their network, they beat the crap out of it in their labs. They're supposed to do that. Operators do that today. And for them, that's an adequate test point before it actually goes into a live network. I think it's fair to us to say that we're not going to ask them to do anything more than what they currently do. If it works in the lab, that seems to me to be a deployment experience that the working group should listen to and take that forward in this document. This description that's in here has to be in a document we need to put together. So part of what we do today is an open discussion and then get some volunteers to provide some input into putting this document together. So what I'm putting out there is deployment experience, I think, should qualify as real implementations in someone's operator lab somewhere where they're getting real traffic-like conditions in a network that they normally use to evaluate any code or product or feature that's going to be rolled into their production network. So anyone have thoughts with that, rejections to that, a different opinion? Acceptance of that idea? Anyone? Okay, yeah, go to the mic, sir. Oh, acceptance, there we go. So here it is. Who thinks that an operator's lab evaluation of an implementation should be considered successful deployment experience? Okay. Anyone think that's inadequate? One person. Can you articulate maybe why you think it's inadequate? Not to put you on the spot, but I want to put you on the spot.
Adequate to consider it
I'm
deployment.
sorry, we got to do name. Name.
Yeah, it's adequate to consider it deployment experience. I'm not sure it's adequate for us to remove experimental. So that's a distinction I want to make.
Can you explain why? Why would that be different?
Why? Because people play in the labs with million things, and I can give you a big list of things that people play in the labs that never saw the light of a day. So there was a reason why we put experimental. I think we have a very good momentum with the technology, but a deployment experience and talking about the labs again will help us to remove the experimental, but as such is a step forward, but not sufficient. I think we want to see people actually follow up with true deployments
Well, what do you mean by true deployment?
in a production.
Okay, can I address that issue? Because what we're talking about is a little bit vague. I would say that there are some lab work that would be considered almost toy-like. And there are other lab implementations that are actually full replications of the production network with actual traffic patterns. Those things exist. So how would that be different than, I mean, if I'm an operator, I'm not putting that into my network until I beat it up in my lab. Now we're asking the IETF to do more than that?
Oh, it's fine with me. Again, the experimental versus non-experimental. Yeah, like so. Unless you're willing to put money-generating traffic on this technology, we've had an experimental for things that were deployed in real networks for real traffic, for real revenue, and that was about for. So I'm a little bit reluctant to change this definition, not for beer, but what will come, because for beer I have no problem. For what comes after, once you create a precedent.
So can I use your own words in my support? You said unless you are willing to put revenue generating traffic. You didn't say unless you are putting revenue generating traffic. So if I tested through my lab and I know this is what it's done, I am willing to do it with revenue generating traffic. I've met that requirement already.
Okay, let's not.
But I mean, that's the point. That's why you have a lab, right? I do that to do this evaluation before I'm going to go ahead and make that jump. And if we have an operator that's going to step forward and said, I'm ready to make that jump, they've already done that evaluation. Now, I think we can't just take it blindly. We need to look at the work they've done, the extensive amount of testing they've done, and take that all into consideration. Because like I said, some lab work is just a toy, and some lab work is actually real copies of revenue generating traffic.
Yeah, let's talk. When we have good operators with good names come and say that, then we'll cross this bridge. Yeah?
Well, right.
It's a hypothetical. It's almost lawyer. I don't want to have a lawyer discussion. I want to have a technical discussion.
Oh, come on, Lenny, don't give up now.
No, so I made technical points. Now we're moving to lawyer points. So like, you know, sorry, I don't have a legal degree. Technical, I'm very clear.
Yeah.
I think we have a good support of industry. This is a very good stuff to deploy. We want to get it out of experimental, get into the networks to be allowed to do that. Let's not create a precedence with something. I believe we all believe that this will not be experimental. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. So if we believe in it, I'm not sure why we're having a discussion.
But I'm looking for a precedence, and I haven't found one. Right, we're talking, this is the forwarding plane here. What was the precedence to adopt IPv4? I know, I'm honest. I mean, that's where we are in the hourglass. I'm not trying to just be facetious. I mean, this is real now, right? So I don't want to have to set precedence with it. I'd like to reference something that we have, and what we have is text here that's not defined. So I'm trying to understand what the community understands, and your input is very important. But what we do from this group, let me step back a little bit.
To me, so to me, deployment experience is not a lab. As simple as this. To me, deployment experience is not a lab.
Okay.
I can give you many examples when lots of time and money was spent in a lab and this stuff went nowhere.
So I wouldn't say it's hard and fast here, but there's a bit of a chicken and egg that goes with this as well, right? And you know, if we put a immovable object, and it's going to be a little tough. However, one of the options, and maybe take a sense of the room, is we could probably move this all the way to RFC under experimental much quicker. But does that really serve our purpose? Is it worth going through the work and making this effort to ensure we get on the standards track, take a little extra time and do what I think is important for the overall internet architecture rather than push it through? So let's get a sense of the room first, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Who thinks it's worth the effort to try to get this work shifted to the standards track? Who would rather see us just push this through and keep it experimental? Wow. Okay, so 4 to 12, 15-ish. So standards track is kind of weighing in on the volume there. We'll take it to the list to get some feedback. So in our charter, we have, it didn't say no option. It gave us the option to move this stuff forward. So I'd say that is work that has already been accepted to be adopted by the working group. We can move that forward. It's still up to the group to decide. And then, of course, on to ADs and IANA to make the decision on where we move. ISG. No. Who makes the decision on the move from track to track? All right.
Early Atlas. So
Yes, you did.
to make the decision to have it be not experimental would require rechartering the working group, because the working group is chartered for experimental work. And that would be myself taking the working group charter to the IESG for approval. And with the current charter, that would mean that, for instance, this number 9 having a document which would be acceptable to the other to the rest of the IESG for a solid reason to make the change. I would also like to point out the existence that we now have status change mechanisms so that it's possible to take a document which is informational or experimental or proposed standard and simply do a status change to change it from experimental to proposed standard, or in fact proposed standard to internet standard. It doesn't require it does not require the working group re-rolling and redealing with the document.
And you're saying post RFC?
Yes. There's some discussion as to whether it would be less confusing to issue a new RFC number with the accurate status. We're still getting some, experience, because there's one doc that did have a document status update, and we're learning from that. But we do have that process available to us in the IETF.
So I'd say we have that process. It's not completely fleshed out. We have a process here as well, working them in parallel to see where we go. So I'd say from our vote count, it sounds like we have enough interest to at least work on this document to make our case. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, for those who would like to push it forward faster, I mean, this doesn't stop that. I mean, work's still going to progress, but at least, if nothing more, that being skeptical is good. Here's a chance to put together an argument that you can then evaluate and decide whether to accept it or not. All right.
There is also now, for other purposes, but it might be interesting here, the waiting for implementation status for documents, where you take them past working group last call and determine consensus and get them into really solid shape. And then if it sits waiting for implementation, which in this case might be implementation and deployment, that would at least be a way of indicating the documents are fairly close to done, and we could also get some of the director reviews done ahead of time. I'd certainly welcome seeing progress on this item. I personally did not anticipate an argument about lab experience qualifying as deployment experience when we wrote the charter.
Just in my defense, that was my point. I've spoken to others that thought that was okay. So I said, well, it hasn't been defined. Let's find out what the room thinks. Deployment doesn't say revenue generating either.
So I guess we have to get a little bit more feedback maybe from the operators, right? If they have any issues with something being experimental, putting in the network, or it has to be a standard track. Let's see, from an architecture point of view, if we did our job well, then it doesn't really change anything, right? It's more a process that we have to go through. So I think operators speak up.
Right. So that's a point too. I mean, to your concern, I mean, if we have, sure, lab is not live and we haven't defined either way, but it really comes down, whatever that case, it's the operator input's more important than the implementers here.
Yeah, I would just kind of echo
Name,
what
sir. Name.
Lenny, Giuliano, Juniper. I would echo what Andrew was saying. I mean, a lab is a lab. And also it creates a really low bar that you can kind of game the system. Yeah, I put it in a lab. Okay, cool. Deployment experience. You know, there's a difference between a lab and deployment experience. There's some extensive labs, don't get me wrong, but that still doesn't substitute for what a real deployment is. And I think, you know, if I were an operator, I'd be more comfortable adopting something that isn't experimental than somebody who tried to game the system by getting it into standards track by claiming that a lab deployment is a real deployment.
Yeah, I mean, I also think Andrew made a good point. But for me, the real issue is why do we want to do extra work to make it standard rather than experimental? I mean, what difference does it make? It's just a matter of politics. The base documents have been sitting around for 3 years with maybe in one case there was a change through the interim. Mostly they haven't changed much. The editors are likely to die of old age before the things become an RFC if we do too much more work on it. It would kind of be nice to get them off the queue and you know, we have to publish an archival format as soon as we can.
No.
Martin Hornefer from DT. There has been the question for operator feedback. It's fine here. Well, long story short, I think this question doesn't really matter too much. So what matters for us most is running code. Next is, do we have a document we can refer to? So having an RFC rather than a workbook document would definitely be a plus. Workbook document, of course, always being better than anything else.
Okay.
So, but you are also right, Greg. There are labs and there are labs. Whatever is in our lab or my lab in specific is usually quite close to being actually deployed in a very big network. And anything that is going to be deployed in our network is going through this lab. So lab is something different than lab in many cases. That's true. In general, I would say, yes, this is work that belongs on the standard track. But if there's serious difficulties or delay, I don't really care.
Thank you.
Greg Mirsky, ZT. Let me extend this argument of lab a little bit further to interoperability, because how we evaluate whether solutions are interoperable or not, I believe that we do it in the lab. So with lab being testing two different implementations and proving interoperability, would it be sufficient to demonstrate interoperability or not? So in my understanding, that's sufficient. Then the lab itself is reasonable. But I agree with the previous speaker that there are labs and labs.
Louis Jalil, Verizon. So I'm trying to understand. Yeah. So what's the ask from the operator to get it from experimental to standard? What's the ask?
So
I mean, I heard operator revenue.
Let me chime in here. So I like hands going up, and obviously we had a lot of hands going up, 15 people. We need this informational RFC to be worked on, pointing out, you know, the application of the technology experience and so on. So these 15 people, if they care about getting the stuff on the standards track, rather than just popping a hand up, should basically start to crank this RFC.
I know, I understand that, but I heard about revenue generating deployment for.
Just maybe quickly to clarify, maybe the question to operators is, you know, does it matter to you if you deploy something in a network which is experimental versus standards track? Yeah. Does it have to be standards before you actually touch it or put it in a network?
95%, if not 99%, it has to be standard track. It won't be experimental. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. Except, you know, what? Yeah, yeah. So there's other options right now, right? I don't have to deploy this because I've got other options. Right? But if I'm standard and the option is clear and it brings benefit to the business, then I will deploy it. But if I'm deploying it just for the fun of it, and it might argue, but I have other options today. So there's things all over. So came at the time, you're right, but you know, what are the other options were at the time? So I mean, I'm an operator, and I'm asking the question: what do you want from an operator to deploy an experimental, revenue generating? You know, this. If that's the ask, you know, I'll think about it. But I'm just letting you know, that's not how we normally operate a big service provider. Maybe on a smaller ones, maybe they will say yes. A big service provider, it's a risk.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Robert Rush with Bloomberg. So from the perspective of deployment in enterprise network, what really matters is when we deploy experimental and then it switches to the standards track, are IANA components going to be reallocated or they always stay the same, even if they are from different pool, right? Because if there is no change in implementation, I don't think it matters which way. What matters is actually integral implementations. So as long as the spec stays intact, specification-wise, I don't care.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, can you clarify? Because I thought that it will be enough just to flip the experimental to standard after, and everything stays the same. So there is a reason for deployment, guys. We do have a bug every now and then after passing labs, or we don't.
So, once again. The IANA code points wouldn't change. As I was saying, if the documents were issued as experimental RFCs and then we had a draft that explained the benefits and so on and our experience with it and wanted to go to standards track, that could be as simple as a status update to the document to change it from experimental to standards, to proposed standard. The reason why the working group was chartered with experimental and number 9 was put in here as a way to go forward is because, as Greg said, this is at a very narrow point in the hourglass, and if it provides concrete benefits to networks such that there's a strong motivation to deploy it, great. Obviously, I like the technology myself, but if it's simply a lovely technical idea that doesn't have the business drive behind it, I don't want IETF standards to have to take into account for the next 20 years for an idea that didn't happen, right? And that's really what the heart of 9 is getting to, is when we had the BOF, there were obviously the nice technology, a lot of progress has been made on the document since then as well, but we couldn't quantify some of the benefits that would drive towards deployment. And if you look at the charter text, which is somewhat hard to read from here, then you'll see that the question is sort of, what are the benefits? What's our experience in the trade-offs? Can you quantify it in a way that justifies it? And bluntly, does it actually solve your problems?
Right, so this has actually been pretty enlightening too. Thank you. That it looks like we have, really there's no hard requirement to change the charter direction before these documents get published. We can take this stuff forward and in the experimental track, and in parallel, those of you who raise their hands, I'll reach out on the email list, we can start working on this document, which will be needed in either case, to move this work into consideration forward to make that revision into the standards track. I like that. Keeps everybody busy, and I think keeps everyone happy. Move things forward, we got something documented, we can actually get things deployed, and then we can then follow up with a doc to move it forward. So this was the fallout here. I mean, we can beat this up in the room a bit more. What's our time-wise here? Actually, we're doing great, and you guys are dying to spend more time talking about beer, right? Look at that, nods and grins. I see smiling faces the first time today. So what to come up with this in particular, the analysis of the impact and benefits of new beer data plane to the overall internet architecture, specifically what you talked about, that choke point. Like, what is this benefit? And I mean, it's obvious from those of us who've been banging on multicast long enough and see the delta, right? But what hit me is that I would say IP multicast was a mistake. I'm going to throw it out there. Using the IP header to represent multiple endpoints requiring end-to-end flow state across the internet is a pretty broken idea, right? It's not a requirement in unicast at all. And so we basically bent the rules in '89 to do something unique. And the reason why it was done is because the utility of replication is well understood. And we needed to get a tool set moving forward to get there. And that tool set began in a stateless manner on IP and has basically evolved with those assumptions for decades. Finally, we came to a point where the maturity of the internet is grown to where we have our networks as well as our internet responsibility. And within our networks, we make decisions that are end-to-end within our network and not end-to-end host-to-host. And BIER was came out of the chance of looking at that and say, what do I want within my topology that gives me the utility of replication without this flow-based requirement? So I think, in this discussion, that's at least if I were to write this now, that's kind of the direction I would take, that we're fixing a 30-year-old mistake. Right? We're providing a set of tools now that makes unicast replicate with the same simplicity, the same I'll let you guys use this phrase. I call it deterministic convergence. Something that's totally unique to those of us who have been banging around with multicast long enough, right? You do something in your lab and it looks great, and you roll it out in deployment, and as more and more people use that service, the performance degrades because the flow state begins to explode inside the network. That is no longer a condition in BIER. It's a radical shift in how things are done inside that network. So it's actually, in the same way people, I won't mention technologies, but they'll look at a technology and say, what's your multicast solution for that? Under the assumption that replication is something you could bolt on to any technology after the fact and get that sort of utility. And those of us around long enough know that it's not trivial, and it should be part of the architecture from the beginning. And so what this is doing is really giving a tool set that allows replication in a very inexpensive and lightweight way that has been unique in terms of what we've done in the internet architecture in the past. So am I totally off base? Resonate with anybody? You're back typing. I lost them. Yeah, I tried.
Yeah.
All right.
Good job. We'll remove about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So going back to the show of hands, I won't limit the input. Who is willing to assist putting this document together? Wow, even one of the naysayers. Thank you. Your input would be important. I appreciate it. All right, I'm a little disappointed as many hands came up and said, yeah, let's move it forward, but we got at least 3 now. I'll take it to the list as well, and we can start, an ad hoc discussion and start fleshing this thing out. In the meantime, I think as a group, some of this work is already quite mature, and I think it's time to start considering which documents can start going to last call and start getting some into the editor's queue. Your queue's short? Oh, she's dying for more work. Look at that. All right. Look, she's so bored she's knitting. All right, any objections to that idea? Everyone on board with that? I think we got some good direction now on things to do. All right, any last comments? Anyone know where the great beer is in town? I'm gonna try that one. All right, you found some? Oh, good. Yeah, we found some already at lunch.
Maybe just one last comment about the architecture and the MPLS or the encapsulation draft. So we didn't present it here this time because there were very little changes to that. So all the changes made to the encapsulation document we presented on forehand. So that's why we didn't present it here this time. So I think we're all pretty much in sync.
A testament to its maturity.
Yeah, and just one final comment. One of your concerns is the chicken and egg. You need deployment to prove deployment to get to this next step. And so what I would kind of suggest that if this is useful, people are going to deploy it, regardless of its label, if it's standards track or if it's experimental. If it's useful, it'll get used. So it shouldn't, cause you to prematurely move it to a different category because that'll make it get used. If it's useful, it'll get used regardless of what it's called.
And I think the feedback we got from operators was that RFC status was more important than what track it was on.
Because most of them don't even know what those tracks mean.
Except those in the room. Those in the room here know exactly what it means. They're some of the brightest around right here. His name is Lenny. He works for Juniper. Anything else? Great discussion. Thank you very much. And I'll see you all on the list. We have a piece of work to adopt. We have requests for feedback and input to that migration doc. And then we have moving some of these mature docs forward into requests for publishing. Last call.
All right, blue sheets, please. Everybody sign the blue sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got good from operators. I'm trying to say off.
I can be useful.
Good, man. Did you pick up all the things yourself?
They're all at openfabric.org, yes. Hey, man.
So, so Linux implementations.
Yes, we need one in FRR.
Okay. I don't think we met before. No. Okay, you're in San Jose? Yes.
So it's basically they built it out for the proof of stuff. And that's about it. Still a lot of